you start with the timeline, Rick.
You bastard. It started January 7th. Obviously we're discussing Tyre Nichols here. On January 7th, he was pulled over for suspected reckless driving. There's a video of this. So there's actually 4 videos that were released by Memphis Police Department. The very first video is when they initially pulled him over. So you see the kid get pulled out of the car. They start to talk to him. It looks like they were going to make an arrest with him. He sounds like he's complying, but he also gets up and runs eventually. He flees. So that's resisting arrest, obviously. This turns into a crazy foot/car chase for quite a while, because they said it was approximately 8:30 p.m. that they pulled him over. And the last video shows that it's 10:30 p.m. when they call the fire department. So he's running around for a while. And they're trying to hunt him down, find him. They finally get him on.
Actually, that's not. If you watch the first video, Rick,
yeah,
they found him within a few minutes. It was
so. Why was
like
it
you can hear it? So there's 2 police officers on video 1, right? The one had the body cam footage, and then the other one is the dude who got pepper sprayed as they were trying to take him down. When he fled, there's a few minutes of video that play. I think probably about like 5 to 6 minutes of video. And towards the end of that video, you can hear on the police radio that they found him. And the second police officer, the police officer who got pepper sprayed, ends up leaving the first scene and then ends up driving and going to the second scene. So they actually found him within a few minutes of the traffic stop. It just took a while after that to get him down and restrained, and then also even longer to call paramedics. So
what I heard was it took 30 minutes to get the paramedics, right?
It took I think the first initial paramedics showed up within, I think, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but the ambulance, the stretcher didn't show up for like at least another 20. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty insane.
Yeah. And watching the videos, it looked like it took quite a while for them to even start rendering aid.
Which is crazy, right?
Absolutely
to
crazy.
the video, because I think most people, anybody who's watching this has seen the video. And let's get into our reactions as to what we think happened and what we think is just.
Well, I don't. After
Well,
watching all 4 videos, I honestly don't think anything is just.
Yeah, right. I don't really know how you can say anything is, especially after watching the video. I can tell you the initial reaction, my bleeding heart. First thing I thought is, what are they doing to this young man? Before I saw the video, when I saw the video, I see a very scared person. I don't know why. I don't know his background, right? So I can't judge the guy, but I do see someone that's really scared, and at some point might have been not thinking as clearly as possible. He was in fight or flight, and
he's scared for the same reason everyone's scared when it comes to a traffic stop with police nowadays, or any interaction with police nowadays. It's because of all the things that have happened over the past couple of years. People are terrified when it comes to a police officer approaching them. It doesn't matter what the reason is.
There was a couple cops, right?
Yeah, there was. And a police officer approaches them, they're instantly nervous, and they're terrified that what happened to him is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's the end result. So he was scared of that, and unfortunately it was his reality.
It's scary to think that. I mean, how much of his decision making to run was just fight or flight, and not so much. It's weird because your mind, your body, you do crazy things when you're really absolutely in a life or death situation. It's not always going to be the right decisions. And then it's up to these officers. I think that they're responsible. They have to make sure that they negotiate this situation as they're professionally trained to do, That doesn't
here's my thing. I think this could have all been prevented if the cops at the first stop would have handled it better. And this is what I mean by that. So first of all, we don't have video footage of how he was recklessly driving, right? The second thing is that all their hoodies said organized crime unit. So was this a task force and they were looking for him, or did he just happen to cross their way when they were in the middle of scoping out something else, right? But anyway, when they pulled him over, they yanked him out of the car. So it wasn't like a gentle stop like, hey, license and registration, right? So that would lead me to believe that he actually did something that was really reckless, and it put the cops on edge, right? But when they had him on the ground, I get it. People can be squirrely. We've seen one cop take out big dudes, and then we've seen events where it could take 6 cops to take out some crackhead, right? But in this case, like, he was on the ground, he was laying on his side. They had one cop at the top and then another cop at the bottom. Well, my theory, and I don't know anything about, what police tactics are and stuff like that, but I do know a little bit about grappling, right? And restraining, stuff like that. So if the second cop, he took out his taser immediately and put it at the guy's hip, right? I'm thinking, well, you're already one hand short, right, in restraining a guy. If he would have used two hands, grabbed his legs, flipped him so instead of him being on his side, he would have been on his back, and then they could have worked from there to cuff him, it would have been done within a couple minutes.
Did he tase him or no?
And he attempted to tase him when he ran. And
once he took off, he
missed.
fired the taser, yeah.
Which is another thing about tasers, right, is that I say for most of the videos that I've seen, whenever cops use tasers, it doesn't work, right? Either one prong misses or it bounces off the ground or they misfire or something like that. But anyway, I think this could have all been prevented at the very first stop.
Well, see, when they conducted the first stop, they had already started skipping steps of escalation.
They were part of a gang unit, right? A Scorpion gang unit. I think that's what they were called.
It said organized crime unit on their hoodies.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
And then I don't know this for sure, but they were part of a Scorpion unit. So that means that they're probably not trained very well. They might be trained
Shouldn't they be
in it,
best of the best though?
But not in traffic stops. Right.
Well, no,
So
you have to remember
more specific,
if
right?
they're on a specialized team, then they've already done their due diligence in the field.
Right.
You
But
don't
that's-
just get
so
hired and go
traffic
straight to the
before.
team. So they've done all this before.
But
The reality is they probably have a different mentality now.
Right.
Right. And their mentality is more of a,
Everybody's out to kill me kind of thing. Because
whatever it is that they actually specialize in, because I don't know what it is that these guys actually do. Right. But you have to assume that their mentality is least officer on the beat right now. Right.
More
Confrontational. There you go. And, well, I mean, we can go with lethalized for right now because they did kill a guy. And when it came to escalation and de-escalation, I'm not sure what they focused on because, like I said earlier, they instantly started going to escalation. Like they were ripping the guy out of the vehicle at gunpoint. They immediately had him on the ground. They were screaming and hollering at him, get his hands behind his back. He's already terrified, right? Granted, when you don't comply with lawful order, it is technically resisting arrest. And if
you're two videos
I think we focused a lot on the humanity of Trey, right? And I think that's very important. I think that the police officers in this situation are also human beings, right? And Rick talked earlier about a fight or flight mentality. I think the cops also found themselves in a fight or flight mentality. Once you're in a chase and you got that blood pumping through your body,
they weren't in a chase,
rushing.
So let's.
Chase.
Okay,
no,
so
not
that's what I'm
initially.
trying to get to. We're going to skip the two videos in between because those are
hold on. Let me finish
essentially
this
chase.
thought.
No,
because
because I see where you're going, and I think it's important.
I don't want
that
the thought to be left
bring
there because
that
I don't want to be
thought
taken
there.
out of context.
No, this is the context, is it not? Because you talk about fight or flight from the police officers, and what the end result would be the fight or flight of the police officers. Am I wrong?
So they're also in this mindset of attack, right? They got to apprehend this. They're probably alpha personalities, and they're not going to flee, right? Most cops are going to be fight personalities, not flee personalities. So once you're in that situation, you got all these emotions and stuff rushing. Mm-hmm. Greg talked about at the beginning, if they would have done maybe some different tactics, maybe it would have stopped. Lee talked about their initial reaction to him. Trey could have also complied, right? And then hopefully Tyre, I'm sorry. This wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, even with him not complying, this is not a just situation. The results, I mean, as trained police officers, they should have more restraint.
And that's the difference, right? Like the military trains fight, right, by using tactics and training. Police also do that for tactics and training.
Yeah, but
so they should have rose above their fight or flight by following procedure and their tactics.
I think we have a huge
crazy
issue
thing to
within
me
our
is he's talking about
society.
fight or flight, right? And it's like, okay, if your fight or flight is brought about from someone possibly reckless driving, because that's the thing, it wasn't like a straight reckless driving allegation.
Are you
It was
qualified to be in that position at that point? If that's what's going to trigger you?
Yeah, because it was a possible reckless driving, right? And then he pulls up to a stoplight, and in one of the videos, you hear the officer saying, like, when he's describing what happened, he pulled up to the stoplight after he, almost hit my patrol vehicle, and just turns on his blinker like nothing happened. The guy was probably on his fucking phone. Oh shit, swerved a little bit, and then pulled up to the next stoplight thinking nothing happened. And all of a sudden he's being detained at gunpoint and ripped out of the fucking car.
I would argue that society is being trained to be fearful of their life whenever they're interacting with police as well, right? So I think the media and all this fear around cops killing people has increased the problem tremendously in our society. Where now, especially as a black man, you get pulled over by a police officer, you think you're going to be murdered, and
You
so
think
your
that's
first.
just now?
It's been for
I mean,
years.
I think
years.
it's been this way.
Decades.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
decades,
I mean,
true.
for a
A
few
century.
decades, it was better.
I
The
wasn't around a
90s,
century ago, so I couldn't tell you.
I know, but I'm just saying it. This is
Well,
there's
but
historical
here's the
record
thing
of this
too,
being systemic
is
for
that
100 years.
the police should take that into account, right? They should take that into account that a black man is going to be more fearful if I pull him over, especially at night, right?
So
And they should take
how do
that,
the
like
police
Lee
react
talked
to
about,
that then?
escalation, de-escalation. They should take that as a factor in de-escalating the situation,
Sure.
right? They should know that.
But-
I mean,
but if
everybody
the-
across the nation
See, the
knows
problem
what's
too,
going
though,
on with
is
cops.
you have people in these positions of power, right? Who don't
Yeah.
have real world experience or life experience. You know, you got 21, 22-year-olds responding to domestic violence calls who have no fucking clue how to handle a goddamn marriage that's falling apart. You know what I mean? And they're supposed to counsel these people. And these same people are on these traffic stops with these people who are fearful for their life in that situation. And they don't understand why, right? They have no experience gauging that kind of mentality. They have nothing in their background that tells them otherwise, other than I'm a police officer, do what the fuck I say. And they shouldn't be in that position. And if they are in
That's
that
an
position, they
alpha
should get
thing,
better
yeah.
training, right? In that situation, because these people need to understand what it is they're walking into.
And that should be the responsibility of the department, right? To make
Should
sure
be.
their cops
But
understand.
you know what? It's like at the end of the day, you also wanted to be a police officer. Take your due diligence and actually research the fucking job.
Now,
Right?
just,
I
not
think
to
go out there with
mention, most
I
police
think-
departments now are very much pushing back on the mental health aspect. Like, hey, we're not counselors; we're here to keep the peace. And you hear that a lot. Sheriff Villanueva in LA County was saying that quite a bit. We shouldn't be first responding to these kinds of calls. We shouldn't have that kind of training. We're there for reaction. Which, in this case, it kind of shows you that just a little bit of training might have helped de-escalate this a little bit, right?
Here's-
If they were
here's-
receiving it.
So how
Well,
many
no,
videos
because
have we
these-
ever seen of a black man getting pulled over and then just beat to death without fleeing? Right? Like it doesn't happen.
And it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
There's no
Just-
statistics
of
showing
just
that
getting
that
pulled
actually
over
happens.
and then beaten to death?
Unfortunately.
Please tell me recently in the past 5 years when
5
show me
minutes.
the
What do you
video.
want? Because now it sounds like you're doing that weird gaslighting thing again. So
no,
for
show-
real,
No, in the last 5 years, show me the last
Okay.
video that
I'll
you
look
saw.
up statistics for you.
Somebody just and the cop just attacks them like a dog off a leash, right? It doesn't happen. But and I think the issue that we're going to keep running into with this, and it's going to continue to escalate within our society, is that we want to just blame the police officers. Now, while that is very true, and we do need to blame the police officers without a doubt, I think that there needs to be accountability, not just when a death happens, but when anybody is improperly arrested and treated poorly under police custody. I think that that's well established. I think we've talked about that ad nauseum as a society, right? We know that needs to happen. There needs to be systems in place that hold police officers accountable. But we also need to get it out there to just comply. Like if you feel like you're being unjustly arrested, well, let's put some resources into more public defense for these people, right? So then
Or
they
at least
can actually have
better
a defense.
public defenders. too.
So you
Right.
said 5 years,
So-
right? So
Yeah, Rick,
from
I don't want to hear
2017
Rick, I don't want to hear
to
statistics.
2019.
Tell me about a time when somebody who was complying got murdered.
Okay, I'm trying to tell you, shut the fuck up. Over 600 people died from 2017 to 2019, and 28% of them were black, the majority. From 2022, 24% of all traffic stops that resulted in someone dying, it was a black person. So yes, they are disproportionately targeted in
Rick,
these
you cannot
specific
answer-
things.
But you're
So what do you want? Yeah, I'm going
racializing
to give you fucking
because you
statistics.
racialized
Yeah,
it.
I shouldn't rationalize this?
No, you racialized it, and you also didn't.
We were
ask
literally, that was the subject. You said, prove
So-
to me that black men
Okay.
are
That's
disproportionately
not what I
hurt.
said.
Okay.
That's
In
not what I
traffic
said. That
stops.
wasn't. That
One
was
of-
not.
one of the
There's your
things-
proof.
That
one
was
of the
not the
things-
question.
Cooper, what the fuck
Okay.
are you talking about?
Rewind the video. I asked you
Okay, hold
how
on.
many times are people being murdered when they comply.
600
Well,
times.
When they
okay, hold on.
That
comply,
is the
when they,
statistic.
Okay,
when
hold
they
on.
don't
Hold on.
resist arrest, Rick.
Duper. The
How quick
cops
was it?
in
Let me
this
Google
stop.
that for you again.
So
You
the
can't.
cops in this stop didn't have the intention of murdering him.
I don't think
But he
any
did
cop has
end
that
up
intention,
dying.
right?
So
Yes,
there
and he
may be
did.
more cases of that happening.
But I think that these cops were egregious in their actions, right? And I think that they need to be held accountable. I do believe this, Rick. But what you're missing is my point. You're not even hearing my question. You answered. You strawman my question.
That's not a straw man. It's a fucking gaslight. Learn your
No.
definitions. That's what you've been doing here with your
No,
bullshit.
it's not.
Oh, well, it's just not possible that we could be a racist country. That's impossible that we should talk about race here. Oh, goodness, that's just ridiculous when that's literally what you fucking said.
That's not
So
what
you
I
want
said.
proof to prove your argument wrong. I'm sorry. I gave it to you. You're
Rewind
wrong.
the video. Rewind the
Yeah,
video.
rewind it. I'm sure they will.
Please.
I'm sure everybody will when they're
Everybody,
watching
please
this.
rewind it to the
Yeah,
video
go back a minute and you'll see
So,
that
where
Duper
I
said that.
asked
So as this
how many people are being murdered when they
as
were-
this video escalates, right, and you get to watch their body cam vid, and you see that it ends up with him in a different intersection, right, and there is one officer who is just absolutely beating the snot out of this guy.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Right. And I was watching the video, and then when it got to that part where he is kicking him in the head while he's on the ground, right, and then they stand him up, and he punches the guy several times.
Mhm.
Right. And every time he punches him, it looked like he was putting all of the weight that he had in his body.
Yeah, those are
behind that punch.
haymakers.
Oh,
They were
and there
not
was a
light
cop that
punches.
walked away from it and then came
And-
back and batoned him.
And he wasn't
The
able to
cop that
defend
walked away
himself when he
from it,
took that.
I saw his body cam video. He had
Mhm.
walked away because number one, he was out of breath. They're clearly not in shape. And number two, he had pepper sprayed himself. He
Mhm.
walked away
Yeah.
and he was on the radio and trying to catch his breath. And then he comes back with a baton and instantly starts batoning the guy. I'm
Yeah.
going to baton the
Yeah.
fuck
No,
out
yeah,
of you.
and he declares it. He declared it before he did it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at this point, yes, and I would say that this is where it transitioned from that fight or flight mentality to just pure brutality, right? Because they actually had the kid
I
on
think
the
it
ground.
transitioned to pure brutality prior to that, actually.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
the
maybe-
haymakers.
Yeah, the haymakers for sure. Yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
now what they're doing is if they transition from fight or flight to just revenge, right? Like they feel like they were wrong because they had to chase this kid. They feel like they were wrong because this kid didn't comply to their orders, and now it's just I'm gonna beat the shit out of you because you didn't listen to me. And I
Yeah,
think that is a
Well, and one of them
dangerous
talks.
mentality.
One of them talks about in one of the videos where he's sitting there with a sergeant or someone explaining what happened. He's talking about how the guy had his hand on his gun during the fight.
Mhm.
No, don't start trying to push that because in all the videos that I've seen, I don't see him reaching for your fucking gun.
His hands
Well-
were not available to do that. I don't know if anybody
No,
saw
they-
it.
In the majority of the
these
video, I
situations-
saw two officers with one officer in one hand, one officer in the other hand. They still couldn't gain control of him for whatever fucking reason at that point.
But
and
let's
haymakers being dropped, and I didn't see anybody trying to grab for a fucking gun.
but
Dude,
let's
and
look
those
at it- let's
haymakers,
look
he
at it-
wasn't able to defend himself at all because they had his arms and his hands.
They had both of his
Oh, yeah,
both
yeah,
of his
dude.
arms. I have no
Yeah,
idea why the
right.
fuck he was punching him the way he was.
Yeah.
that was because they were angry and they were trying to get revenge.
I
for
was
chasing-
watching a video from the PD, and one of the things that came out that they were saying was that they train their officers to match the level of force they're trying to stop, right? So however extreme it is coming at them, they're supposed to use equal force to that. So do you believe in any way that landing haymakers, using the baton was an equal
No.
level of force?
None of it was.
I don't.
That's the
None of
question,
that
right?
is.
No.
No. So
That's
not-
they're
it wasn't.
definitely at fault.
No.
That's it.
If you've ever been in a tussle, right? Well, things move very quick in that moment, right? And so this police officer, whichever officer, said that he thought that Trey was reaching for his gun. He might sincerely believe that. He might, right? But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. He didn't have the gun. He wasn't pointing the gun at you. When you had a police officer holding you and then another one was punching you repeatedly in the face, those are not situations where that kid was reaching for a gun. Those are pure brutality. This is probably the worst video I've seen, probably since the Rodney King video, when it just comes to cops unleashing anger towards a a suspect.
There were 2 officers too. I don't think we've brought this up, but those guys were, none of them were small dudes. They were large.
Yeah, you
muscular
said they were
guys.
out of shape. Yeah, they were big dudes, right?
They were
were
big
muscular.
dudes. Like, a couple of them were well towering over him, and he was a pretty tall guy too, right? But you could tell they were 6'2", 6'3", somewhere around there. And one of them had a bad knee apparently because you saw him limping in the video. But these guys, you're telling me these 5 men that were carrying, collectively 1,000 pounds of muscle, couldn't hold him down?
You know what? That one's tough. So when I was in the military and we were in Iraq, we used to have wrestling matches. And dude, the big guys, I could take them. It was the little scrawny fucks, man. They are tough.
Endurance.
And like some of them, their muscles are dense. Like they might not have giant biceps, but they are strong, right? So just look at the size between the 2 of them and say, oh, hey, why wasn't the Hulk been able to apprehend Spider-Man? Well, because Spider-Man's wily as shit, right?
Yeah.
And they're agile, right? And they can move faster and they can slip out of things faster. But
when you had 5 soldiers taking down 1 Iraqi, you were able to do it, right? Without killing the person.
Exactly. I'm just that the size difference doesn't necessarily always
Do you
matter.
know which officer now that was laying those haymakers? The most egregious part.
He's probably I don't.
I would say he's the most culpable, right? They're all culpable.
I was going to say that, but is that true? Because the other officer held him while he was being punched in the face.
That's true.
Right.
There comes a point too of accountability where the officers around you are watching the actions you're doing and need to shut you the fuck down. And they didn't do that.
Yeah, they need to stop it. This is the same thing that happened with Floyd, right? Where they were talking about the officers that were there. But the whole point is that they're like, hey, man, you could have stopped this. You were right there.
You could have gotten your partner off of it and said, hey, we need to stop doing this and start doing this. And
another factor too that was in the videos is, and I don't know if they released a talk screen or not. I'm assuming they did one, but the cops are saying that, he had to be on something. He had to be under the influence of something. From the footage I saw, he didn't look like he was under the influence of anything. He looked like he was terrified for his life.
You know what it is? They're saying that stuff because in their minds, they were in a fight for their lives for some reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where that came from.
They're normalized that in their, as a Scorpion unit, right? And a gang unit.
And see, that's the thing.
Normal to them.
See, that's the thing is everything they're saying in these videos, right, is probably something they say for every single altercation they have. He went for my gun. He was reckless driving. He was doing this. He was doing that.
And there was a lot in there.
Yeah. And they use all of that in their reports to finalize and justify every action they took.
He was there on January 6th. Like, I can see them just throwing anything out.
Yeah. Well, because what they're doing is they're trying to excuse their actions, right? And so they're trying to rationalize. They have not released the
toxicology. I just looked it up.
But at the end of the day, I don't think that matters in this scenario because that's not the issue.
You heard him say, okay. Like, you heard Tyre say, okay, I'm complying at one point at the traffic stop. Right? Yeah. At the very beginning, he did say, I'm complying. And they started getting, and this is what I saw. So this is my interpretation of it. But when he started the I'm complying and he rolled to his left, right? Or maybe it was his right in the camera. But he did say I'm complying, and they seemed to get a little bit more aggressive with him, and you could see it in his face. He got scared. So I mean, it's hard for me to think that this guy was on something, and more the dude was terrified because he knew what was coming. Right?
Yeah, it's all speculation.
And that was going to be a point I was going to make. Right? Like, yes, we're all supposed to follow police directions, right? But there's a fine line between resisting and when you are actually fearing for your life and running away because you are in fear for your life, right?
Yeah.
Like if you were in fear for your life, I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure, I'm not saying you would have ran away from the police, but when you're actually 100% afraid of your life, I can see why he ran.
But
right?
psychologically,
I mean, they had him at gunpoint, they put him down, they had tasers pointed against his body, right? And he's probably thinking this whole time, like, what the fuck did I do?
Mean, and he was pulled out at gunpoint and all that shit. And you even hear him at the very beginning of the video. What the fuck did I do?
And
they never told him what the fuck was going on.
They never told him.
The other part of my thought earlier is that, Trey's also a human being, right? And he's got a lot of emotions running through him.
Tyre.
I'm sorry. I don't want to disrespect this poor kid. But he's got a lot of emotions running through him, and he's very worked up as well, right? And whenever you have a lot of people worked up and their emotions are running wild,
Yeah.
there's always potential for chaos in those situations.
Yep.
And the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is look at this as objectively as possible, right? And then take into account the psychology of each individual who is participating. Because I think whenever we see these videos, and especially with this video, because it is just so overly violent, it is hard to separate our emotions from objective, right? And I think that we always do that, and we want to villainize the police officers and just make it black and white, right? At the end of the day, these cops were wrong. I don't disagree with that, and they deserve prison time. They murdered this kid without a doubt, but they're still human beings, and we need to figure out what was going on with them that caused them to go to this point of such brutality.
Tyre was a human being too.
I agree 100%. Everybody
the family
here
no
was a
longer
human
has
being.
him. So,
So it is about determining what could have been done differently.
The shittiest part
And
about
both,
this is
both sides could have dealt with it differently, and he would still be here.
I guess the shittiest part is that there was a death, but one of the shitty things that I hate about this is I like to go through videos and analyze it and see what the suspect was doing or subject was doing, right, to result in that final outcome, right?
Yeah,
what were they doing
right.
for this? Okay, because everyone always just jumps straight down.
Escalate the situation.
Everyone always just jumps down the throats of the officers. They assume it's bad policing, all that kind of stuff. So I like to go through it. I like to see what it is that the person involved did to escalate the situation the way it went, right? It's not always just the police that escalate things. You know what I mean? It's a majority of times it's the suspect just refusing to comply with a lawful order. And then they start fighting back and everything goes crazy and then something happens. And unfortunately, in a violent scenario, things happen, right? So I'm going through this and I'm trying to find what he did to escalate the situation, and I cannot find it.
Well, running from the police in the first place
Okay,
will escalate the situation.
That
gets
is
your blood
completely
pumping,
aside
right?
because
That's a reaction.
that was it's how what we talked about earlier. It was a fight or flight reaction, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
He was, as he jumps out of the car, he's already yelling, "What the fuck did I do?" Because he has no clue what the stop's even for. He's never told what the stop is for. They have him on the ground. They're trying to tase him. All that shit. You could see the fear in his fucking face. He's absolutely terrified that he's going to get killed. And guess what happened? He got fucking killed.
The video that I did see of the pursuit prior, it didn't seem like it was a high speed pursuit. And I could be wrong. I haven't seen the whole video of the pursuit prior to him being pulled over. So I don't know.
I didn't see anything like that. Where'd you see that?
Necessarily in that.
they haven't released it.
Oh,
they
I
haven't released any of the cam footage from
There's
the
a
vehicles.
cam. There's a cam of him, of the police right before they pull him over. Right. So I'll send it to you guys. And it's not high speed, right? It's pretty slow. So I would, in counter to my discussion about, them going, their blood pumping because he ran. Well, if it was a slow speed pursuit, then that changed the story quite a bit. Right.
Well,
now, if you're driving 80 miles an hour through the city,
because what I heard him describing it after everything was said and done, right? He was saying, like, he was talking about the reckless driving. He was talking about this. He was talking about that. And then they went to go stop him, and he literally pulls up to a stoplight, turns on his blinker, and is just sitting there. There was no pursuit. You know what I mean?
I'll send you guys the video I saw, but it doesn't seem like it was crazy. There's been reports of a pursuit, and so if the reports of a high speed pursuit are true, then that does get your blood pumping, and then that gets the cops in a mindset of fight, right? Yeah. Now, if this is a slow speed pursuit, they're going 15, 20 miles an hour. Maybe the kid isn't really even paying attention and doesn't even see the police officer, and the cops have misinterpreted that as him running. There's also that possibility.
Speed,
and
those are unmarked vehicles too, right?
Yeah, they are. The speed doesn't necessarily justify your fight or flight, because you could be in a 10 mile an hour pursuit and you're no, because even in a 10 mile an hour pursuit, this person's not stopping. You've been traveling for 3 miles now. You have them lit up, sirens going. Your blood is pumping because you have no clue what the fuck's going to jump out of that door.
But not at the same speed as when you're trying to, bob and weave.
No, your adrenaline's still going.
I'm kind of on Lee. I'm on Lee's side with this, because what if he's going slow so that he can get his gun out?
Yeah, your adrenaline is still going, and unfortunately, whether it's slow speed or high speed or whatever the case may be, people still tend to get tunnel vision and all that kind of shit.
I did a little research really quick while we've been talking. Of course, this is all news for everybody, so we're releasing as we find out too. That Scorpion unit that Duper was talking about that they were a part of, it was implemented in 2001. It stood for Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhoods. It was a direct response to the worst crime that was going on in Memphis for the last couple of years. They made 566 arrests. 390 of those were felonies in the last couple of years. So they were dealing with a lot of guns, a lot of gun violence. They were dealing with the worst of the worst in the city, and that's the unit that they were attached to. They've disbanded the unit since this happened in the last couple of weeks. They've already inactivated it, and they're investigating to see checking into complaints and how they handled these operations. But just again, nobody's defending anybody here, but I do want everybody to understand who these officers were and what they were dealing with on a daily basis, which then bugs me a little bit because I ask, why did they make a traffic stop? Why didn't they call in for a marked car? Why didn't they just call for a regular traffic officer to come do this?
Because they're still police officers with lights in their vehicle and a siren and all that stuff. They're allowed to do that.
I would also say that as we learn from their character when they're punching this kid in the face, they're hotheads, right? And sometimes that plays to your advantage when you're dealing with really violent offenders. Right. You need to react quickly, right? In this scenario, it does not yet appear that was the proper response, and perhaps you're right.
I think a lot of it was they were pissed off because they pepper sprayed each other and they took it out on poor Tyre.
Yeah,
and they didn't like that he ran.
A better response would have been for them to call it in and have a more, as they are specialized in gang units, they should have somebody more specialized and more.
Well, marked vehicles and uniformed personnel did start showing up after the initial traffic stop because they did put out in the radio, he's running this way, foot pursuit, that kind of shit. So people were coming to the area. It's just the way it escalated and the way it ended.
Once if this was Star Wars and you saw the Empire coming after you, I don't give a shit if it's the lower ranks or the higher ranks. Anybody coming at me now is a threat, and I'm scared.
Yeah.
So,
and another point I want to make,
slowing down.
As you watch the final video 4, which is basically the final video where the cops are kind of talking, or they're recalling themselves what they thought happened. So if you're watching that and you're expecting that to be 100% factual, don't. Because normally when there's events like emergency events or high pressured events, normally first base reactions are almost 100% inaccurate. And it takes some time to actually look back to figure out what exactly happened. So as a cop say, hey, reach for my gun. Well, I think we can assume that wasn't the case, right? Oh, he was on something, right? We don't know that, right? So as the cops are recalling what happened, yes, that's a part of it, right? Because they need to do their investigation and their write-up to figure out, hey, how did we get from A to B and this guy is where he is, right? Just take that as a grain of salt and just know that their recollection of the events may not be truly accurate,
right,
to themselves.
And
so
they could also not be lies, right? Like that's also an important thing that we got to remember in this scenario is that just because that cop says he reached for the gun, he might sincerely believe that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
These high tense moments, your memory is flawed, right? They've talked about witness statements are very unreliable, right? And that's a witness. They're not even in the fight. Their blood's not even pumping the same
they're
way.
Technically witnesses too, right?
Right,
yeah,
but they're in the event, right? So when you're in the event, your mind is moving so much faster than when you're witnessing it. And so once you're in that event, then you're gonna misinterpret things and your imagination is gonna run wild throughout that scenario. And so I think that's also important is just to not assume that these cops are lying. They might have just misinterpreted the situation.
I have another question about.
I'm still
sticking
to my guns that they use those excuses a lot, though.
And that's also a possibility. 100% a possibility that
I guarantee you
that is a learned talk track.
Yeah, I guarantee you everything they were saying in that video is something that has been in their vocabulary for quite some time now.
Well, this leads to my question, right? They don't say those things until he picks up his body cam and walks around them. They start saying those things. Now, why did he put his body cam down? How did that? I thought it was attached to their uniform or whatever they're wearing.
No,
right?
These guys had external vests on. And the
So
external
he took the vest off?
Yeah, he took his vest off, probably to catch his fucking breath.
It happened during the altercation. Like the only reason you can see what happens in the altercation is because there was like a street camera. But his camera, his body cam for that whole altercation, his camera's facing the ground. Like he puts it on. They talk about what they think they saw, or they the stuff that we were just talking about, right? He might have been on drugs. The traffic stop. Like they were explaining it because they were on camera. I'm just talking about what I saw. It doesn't necessarily mean this is what happened, or what their implications were. But then he puts the camera down at another point too, right? And then picks it back up. So this is like a removable camera. I thought these body cams were, something that they have attached to them and they have to keep on the whole time. So
they are attached, but you have to be able to remove them to put them in their charging dock and the base station so that they can upload video and all that stuff.
Right. But I mean, let's just say
it's possible
like
for them to get removed or knocked off during an altercation, things like that.
Okay. That's what I'm curious about.
They're not permanently affixed.
It seemed very convenient that the only time that camera's off is
during the confrontation. Yeah.
And it's 20 feet away from what's happening.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me that some,
because that's when they're catching their breath, and then now they're going back for the revenge part of this whole thing, right? And so it does actually make some objective.
It doesn't surprise me that
for a man who was
there are
telling me
some
not to
cops
jump
out
to
there
conclusions,
that during a
revenge a
struggle
lot.
will just remove it anyway, just to say fuck it.
Yeah.
No, because I do think that they were out for vengeance and retribution. I guess retribution.
Telling me not to jump to conclusions. You're like, it was a revenge killing.
Right.
Well, I will defend Duper on this. It's not necessarily retribution. You're a human being, right?
Yeah.
We all have puppies, we have dogs, we have kids, we have lives, and humans interact with humans.
So many kids, so many dogs.
You have too many kids. But my point is, there are times where you're like, holy shit, you just put me through all of that, right? Like a dog just destroys something in your living room because they're a puppy and they've just ruined it. You cleaned it up and they go and piss on it or something like that. And in your mind, you just trigger like, I'm going to fucking murder you. Like I can't think anything. I can't think straight. So right. I'm sure there's a point where those officers were not thinking straight. And you saw that they were exhausted. Mm-hmm. A couple of them were kind of injured. Like one of the guys hurt his knee. He was doing that. So they, at some point, I'm sure the pain, the sweat, the adrenaline, everything is pushing them to make a bad decision. Yeah, and that's kind of what I see.
They didn't have the self-discipline within themselves to not take it too far. And that's definitely where the crime was committed in this scenario, is when they weren't willing to stop themselves. Right. Yeah. Because you continue on with just the violence as opposed to saying, okay, this situation is de-escalating. Lee talked about earlier about de-escalation from the beginning. Yeah. There was no de-escalation in any of it, right? It just continued. They continued to escalate the situation, and so they just that's the really problem.
Do you think they could have they had his car? Why didn't they just go back to the car? Like, all right, he ran, but it's not like he's going to get far. We have his car. We know where he lives, who he is. And we'll put a bolo out, have some traffic cops pick him up because now he just resisted arrest.
So the argument that I can make against that is that police departments are already strained, and that actually takes more resources to go back and find them if you don't apprehend a suspect in the moment. Now, on the other side...
that's an invalid argument. They have plenty of resources for that.
On the flip side of that, I would say that, well, not every police department, right? I mean, some police departments...
Well, no, but
a lot of
at the end of the day, it's like...
Memphis has a lot of money for this. They've been getting a lot of money.
If you were to go back and just say, okay, look, he went this way, you get a helicopter above for 10 minutes, you set up a small containment to see if he gets outside of that containment area, and you actively search for him, right? So no matter what, they're going to do that regardless.
But on the flip side of that,
there was no containment set up, there was no helicopter above, wasn't any of that. It was just them doing
and
what
why
they
did
did.
it take so long for EMS to show up?
More than likely, the pursuit wasn't a high-speed pursuit. Right?
It wasn't a pursuit at all. I guarantee you. Otherwise, there would have been more officers on scene way before any of that even started.
Yeah.
And Greg, I was wrong. It wasn't 28. It was 23 minutes for EMS to show up,
which is crazy, right? Like you would think that now I get it. There's only so many EMS and stuff like that. But I think 2 people from the fire department
that's
got
what
fired.
matters when they radioed for the EMS.
Yeah, when did they radio for EMS? Because if they radioed at 20 minutes and it took EMS 3 minutes to get there, that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, why didn't the cops? Because to me, like, as somebody who's had multiple concussions in my life, he clearly was concussed, right? And he suffered considerable head trauma. You can see it the minute that the dude throws that first or second punch, right?
Mhm.
So that can confuse them to think that he's high too, when he's not. He has fucking significant head trauma. And that's not even counting the internal bleeding from when they're kicking him, when they batoned him in the torso. And obviously that's what he ended up bleeding or dying from, not necessarily bleeding internally. I'm assuming that was part of it. But yeah, like you would think that, oh shit, like we did this, we did a number on this dude. We need EMS here to at least cover our ass, right? Because somebody who's dead is going to look a lot worse than somebody who's just fucked up and recovered.
That can come back to, so there's a lot of different things with that. And that can also come back to your dispatcher and how your dispatcher works with you. You know, you go emergent, you get on the radio, you know, you put out that you're involved in a fight, you got units rolling to you. They're already getting fire and EMS and all that to start rolling and stage so that when the altercation's over, you know, they can have, you know, EMS roll in or, you know, whoever's in the fight can say, hey, you know, they're declining this, I'm declining that, no one's hurt, that kind of thing. Maybe have fire roll in just to check them out anyways. You know, because even after a small fight, you really want to get them checked out before you take them.
So this might be an overuse of resources, but what if police officers, whenever they radio in that they are on a foot pursuit for a suspect, what if they just already had a EMT or somebody ready to dispatch fire department?
Like if they're in foot pursuit?
Yeah, because
they just assume that they're going to need it.
Assume that there's going to be a altercation if it's a
Wouldn't
foot
that be
pursuit, right?
kind of an instigation then? Like you're insinuating, like I'm about to beat this motherfucker.
No. Because it would be a preparatory step in case something did escalate, right?
Well, that would take away
if you have a suspect
going on then.
Or
if every time there was a foot pursuit or a pursuit or anything like that, and fire got dispatched to it.
Yeah, but
how about anytime pepper spray or a taser is used, then they call for it.
They do.
Well, in this case,
whenever it goes over the radio and it's like,
no, I just mean anytime pepper spray is deployed, anytime a taser deployed, like any kind of less lethal things like that, you have to have fire and EMS come and check them out.
So, I mean, is that an automatic response the moment that they say pepper spray fired over the radio? Is it automatically dispatched, or is it you still have to call and dispatch the EMT?
You still got to dispatch it for certain things, like, you know, you get over the radio and say, hey, taser deployed. Do me a favor, start 902R, have them roll to my location.
Yeah. What if you didn't have to say start anything, right? What if you just said pepper spray deployed and then boom, that's an automatic EMT on the scene?
These are good questions. I think they're important, and this is something that really, when we talk about, this is really the discussion that should have been had when they started talking about defund the police a couple of years ago. Maybe start talking about actually how things are handling themselves out on the streets. I just sent you guys another link. 2 more officers were suspended after the release of the video yesterday. It was the 2 officers in the video that showed up to respond to the scene. The sheriff's department that they're associated with said after seeing the video and how they reacted to Tyre, they're going to be on administrative leave pending the results of that investigation.
So, what was their role in this? Because I don't know what their role was.
They were literally the response. They responded after everything had been done.
So everything was done, and then now they're being held accountable?
They're being held accountable to make sure that they didn't violate any of the policies that they have in place. That's
pretty basic, right? Give them admin leave pending investigation.
Right.
That's
and
pretty
let them
basic.
Figure it out. Clear them or don't clear them. That's okay.
Well, I hope that they're on leave with pay. If they were
normally
not part
admin
of this
leave is
paid.
paid.
They're on administrative. They're not suspended. Yeah,
I would prefer us not to move into everything with a mob mentality with any of this stuff, right?
I'm just trying to get all the information.
Yeah,
that was
it's
the
good.
most recent thing.
And I don't know enough about it to speak.
So we've kind of talked about a lot of this as a situation as a whole. I think the last thing that I really wanted us to talk about, do you think second-degree murder is the proper punishment to go after them for? Do you think it should be a manslaughter? Do you think it should be first degree?
It's definitely not manslaughter.
What do you think? I don't think it's first degree because I can't see them planning.
In Memphis, is second degree higher than first degree?
No. First degree is always the highest, right?
So of all, and so it's tough because every state has their own laws around murder. So you would have to read the definition of those murders in Memphis and Tennessee.
So the officer the officer that was landing the haymakers and kicking the guy when in the head on the ground and all that, just going straight for the head.
Yeah. That was like he walked away and then he comes back and kicks him in the face.
So
he could be first degree though, right? Because it was premeditated at that point.
I don't know if it was
wasn't
premeditated, but second degree for sure. And I guarantee you that would be an easy file and an easy win. Especially because, and I'll say this, I'm sure this is a part of the military too. You're trained on which areas are lethal and which areas aren't. Right. And most head strikes are categorized in the lethal category. So he was using, technically he was using lethal force almost the entire time.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
How fun is this?
And he had the opportunity to walk away and he didn't. I think that's the most important part about it. Right. Is that one was intentional. The haymakers were intentional. The batons were intentional because he's on the ground at that point. You can restrain him. No, those are intentional moves, and those are just the worst kind of violence that you can see from a police officer.
Absolutely.
It was pretty bad.
You know where they do know where Tyre was before the traffic stop. Do you want to know where he was that evening?
Sure.
Where?
He was at a local park. They were taking pictures of the sunset.
Oh, and do they have video of it?
They have the pictures and shit.
Oh,
that's
nice.
literally where he came from.
He was on his phone driving back somewhere, swerved into the oncoming traffic lane by accident.
That's probably what happened. He was just saying, "Hey, I got done with the park and da-da-da-da."
Yeah.
That's starting to piece it together, right? When you start getting that kind of background.
I think as we get more information, we can actually come back on and release more for our viewers. I think in the meantime, let us know down in the comments what you guys think about this whole situation. And what
can I say one final thing?
Done? Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that there are protests that have been scheduled and been ongoing throughout the country. So if you are going to partake in a protest, please do so peacefully. Right? If the protest starts to turn, violent or starts to turn to where you're, destroying things, just walk away from the protest. I know this is a heated moment for the nation again. So just please protest peacefully if you are going to protest at all.
And I would like to say these police officers were absolutely in the wrong. And the Nichols should be alive today. But don't judge all police officers off this incident, right? I think most police officers in most scenarios are just trying to uphold the law. I do believe that. But they're also human beings. And as human beings, we're going to have some bad apples out there and some good people who act poorly in tough situations, right? So remember that they are still human beings, and pray for the family for Nichols. And he had a 4-year-old son, I believe, that he left behind, which is terrible.
It's a tragedy what happened to Tyre.
Yeah.
And I don't. There's not much you can say about this, and I agree with you. There are good cops, but let's not take away from the fact that this has happened a couple times now in the last month. And I think that attention to what was his name, Keenan Anderson, needs to be brought back up to. He was tased over 6 times while being restrained on the ground, saying, "I am not fighting you." They took his twitches as a resistance. And he also died in custody of police officers. So
that was
a
totally different situation. And I would love to discuss that one with you.
We're going to have to get into it because if you think that this was justified, even the cops are saying, like the police are saying, yeah, that wasn't reasonable force. Sorry.
And if you're a cop, then use these situations and learn from them to make yourself a better cop.
Exactly. We can be better than this as a whole. This country can be better than this. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, and I would say the only way we get over it is by looking at things objectively and removing as much emotion as we can, because I think we can get over this, but it's going to take participation, not just from the police department, but also the public.
Subscribe to the channel to make sure you keep up with all future drops that we have. Make sure you comment down below to let us know what you guys think should have and could have been done in this situation. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and if you can, donate to Nichols' GoFundMe as well. Give it to his family and support him.